Well, hello there, everyone. Here to show you right here is the President's Day of 2019 coloring activity right here. And you see right here is talk about for Jimmy Carter, though. For seeing talking about for President's Day of 2020 that we've seen right here is we've seen for Ronald Reagan, but then I kept thinking too as to where that somebody's going to ask me to do a coloring of Jimmy Carter. And include this right here. This is what I heard, of course. It's like, if anybody warns, is that, yeah, Jimmy Carter was before my time. So it's like, from president from 1977 to 81. And like, want to know, I'm like, yeah, about Jimmy Carter, though. The presidents that only, serve for one term. And that's usually what I heard, too, is that, the presidents that only ran for one term, and whenever you see them on television, then you're just thinking necessarily to where that, whenever you see them on television and know about what they want to talk about, what the president wants to talk about. But, the way I drew this right here is that, I was also thinking too is to where that, whenever you watch these presidents on television, and think as to where that, people are going to have their nicknames, and this is about, I guess, about what I read about, is that with Jimmy Carter, I guess, if he used to work for a peanut factory or something like that before he was elected, and I guess, before he was elected, I guess, would it be the 39th president, I guess he would be, or something like that. But anyway, but talk about right here is that, that right there was a example right there of me right there. And that you're also wondering too that, okay, Jimmy Carter, but before your time and half the time, people say that you have these past presidents, and they say talk about for President's Day that those who have college degrees and those citizens who know a lot about certain presidents of the United States. And I kept thinking too that a lot of times I hear about that is about Jimmy Carter. I guess if he used to work for the peanut factory before he was elected our president. And I was also wondering too that you kind of hear that. I'm like, that he used to role in Disney movies before he was elected our president, or you might hear something, kind of like that too, to where before he was elected our president, that he used to work for the chocolate factory or something like that, or, something like that. But Jimmy Carter, to me, sounds a little bit more like an inventor. Whenever I heard the name Jimmy Carter, I was not really referring too much as to the president. I was referring to more like an inventor. And kind of like maybe like Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison, that he like a for inventor or somebody who discovered a certain research of a certain matter. And talk about for Jimmy Carter right here. And so just think about it as to where that here's the blue right here, but whenever we talk about these presidents, though, I kept wondering, too, that most of these presidents, that whenever we have them in office, that you hear about that, to where that, they only served, they only ran for president. This president only served for one term as our, as our president, as our U.S. president. And whenever you hear about that, sometimes it seems like that whenever a president is elected, that they more likely are going to promise. It's like talk about besides a future is born, that they're going to talk about what they promised. And whenever a president is elected for Congress, it seems like that that's the first thing that you're going to hear a lot of times is that what they promise during the campaign promises. And I don't know what the results would be like from back in 1977 about what president that promised what about job growth, or if it's about vehicles, and then how many of us are going to maybe say that we're going to go ahead and elect a president that's going to make good dessert products or something like that, good coverage, health insurance and coverage for all the citizens and for our children. But still that from based on for what I understand is like Jimmy Carter, he the first thing I may have heard was is that he worked for the peanut factory or something or, you know, something like, you know, yeah, he was, you know, he may have been Democrat. You know, the first thing I can remember whenever I became a registered voter is hearing about between the Democrats and Republicans. Back when, you know, whenever I was very young, whenever I became a registered voter, it was like, you know, are you Democrat or Republican? I really don't know, and I really don't know if I even really pick one or the other. But if anybody say that, yeah, or if you're a Democrat, and then, so yeah, that you have somebody that's going to be talking about the elections, right? And that's going to maybe be like the first thing that they're going to ask you is to where, are you Democrat or Republican or Libertarian in the Libertarian Party? But really, that the first thing that I might mention to is to where that, you know, yeah, I got a college degree. And some of these politicians that talk about if it's Jimmy Carter or if it's, you know, I don't know if we've had a Madison, President Madison. I'm like, you know, if anybody asked me that, you know, what about, you know, Scotty Madison? I'm like, I don't know. You know, have we had a Scotty Madison even for vice president? But, you know, still, you're going to have these presidents, and I want to know, too, about something about Jimmy Carter. You know, before he was elected our president, you know, yeah, he used to work for the peanut factory. And how many of it, I don't know if I would recommend anybody who try that to where that they go ahead and make art out of butter and out of peanut butter and butter. Yeah, I haven't tried that yet, but maybe that if anything that you can maybe use that for like maybe a non-stick recipe, you know, something, you know, yeah, make art out of butter, out of peanut butter and butter, you know something that will be a science experiment that I'm sure that it's, if anything, it's recommended maybe for the non-stick surface. Like if you're baking cookies or something, you can go ahead and put like you know, Jimmy Carter, you know, do like a little artwork or, you know, like something like that. But really, butter is not really a good example of what we call paint. But I can maybe say that, you know, Jimmy Carter. Whenever I first heard that name, even on the TV shows, I kept thinking about maybe he was an inventor, but I didn't realize he was our president. So whenever thinking about the, you know, these presidents, though, about a couple of them, and it's like, say, yeah, well, he was our president, but he only ran for one term. So if anybody were warned to where that, you know, you have this, you know, yeah, that I don't know if we call him what you call the clown president. You know, we have presidents celebrating President's Day. We have presidents that only run for one term. And how are you going to, you know, yeah, most of them from the past, maybe from the past 15 years have been reelected for a second term. And, you know, I think I heard that, you know, I think it was Theodore Roosevelt who ran for 3 terms, I guess, during the time back in the, you know, the 1967, I guess, whenever Roosevelt was president. But, you know, for the presidents of the United States of America, but, you know, you had these presidents that one of them that would only run for one term. And you're also wondering, too, that, you know, there's been about 1 or 2, yeah, that there has been some presidents that, you know, you hear about that to where that one of them, you know, had, you know, been assassinated, like, you know, one of them was shot, or, you know, maybe something else that went on. And, you know, yeah, that you hear about that on the news about these presidents. That one of them got shot, or, you know, the other one had, you know, there was an incident that went on or something like that. You hear that on the papers. But how often are we going to maybe think as to where that, you know, with presidents, that if we want to kind of give them like so far as a tease of the matter, to where that President Carter, you know, yeah, that you know, that dude, that peanut-shaped head dude, he ran for president, and how many of us are going to maybe warn to where that you know, before that this person was elected to be our president, that they used to drive a race car, or maybe something like you know, that they used to work for a magazine publishing company or something like that. You know, yeah, work for the oil rigs or something like that. But talking about for like you know, the first thing I usually hear about, you know, for Jimmy Carter, because whenever I heard that name, I thought he was an inventor. I thought maybe he was somebody, yeah, you hear about that, you know, about Big Tooth, I guess. You know, I don't know really what that's all about, is to where that, you hear about that, to where Jimmy Carter, I guess if he had big teeth, during a time that, during his presidency. So you're like one or two that, big teeth. He had a big tooth, right here. And so, he, I guess I don't know if he was famous for toothpaste. Yeah, was he ever famous for toothpaste? And if anybody would say to do like a little sketch of Jimmy Carter, and I say, was he famous for toothpaste? Sometimes, though, whenever I think about toothpaste, I think about Jimmy Carter. Former President Jimmy Carter, was he an inventor of toothpaste? No, he was the president. Well, still, that, cologne or anything, any products like that. And at the time, you weren't to former presidents. That whenever you hear about them, then you may warrant toward that, you might, maybe just to celebrate, maybe for like a mascot source of activity to where you're going to go ahead and maybe see their images, their paintings on, maybe for certain cologne products, shampoos or something like that. But whenever I first heard about Jimmy Carter, I didn't realize that he was our president. So it's like during the whole time in history class, you read about the American Indians, but not too much of Jimmy Carter. So I kept thinking too that presidents who are only elected, who were only run for one term, and I guess some of it could also be related to the fact about that that if the president loses from the Republican side of the campaigning party, so I guess a lot of it may have had something to do with whenever a president loses, that they try to be reelected, they try to win re-election, but then it didn't work out. That they did not get enough votes, from the Republican Party. If I can remember right, that read a little bit about that, but so far it's like Donald Trump right there. But whenever we watch these presidents on television, and at the time that he's talking to all the American people who are watching. But sometimes it's like, that they kind of look back, and after about maybe a year or two of what they promised, what the president promised, and what the president said that they were going to do, and the first thing that they're going to maybe say is to where that whenever I first walked into, listen people, when I first walked into that office, this is what was going on. So yeah, the Oval Office, the Oval Office is the place to where that, the big, the office to where a lot of the matters that need to be fixed. I guess that's another way of how we can describe the Oval Office. And if anybody warns us too, this to where you walk into that Oval Office and, whenever you first walk into that Oval Office, that, it seems like as to where that people expect so much to be done, for so far as with most of these presidents, that whenever you're elected president, that a lot of times that you might promise this or you might promise that to the American people. And so just think about it as to where that a president who's only going to run for one term, but then still you might say that, that president did the best they could, of trying to fix the matters that were going on in the country, and they might be called clown or whichever, Clown Carter with the big foot or the big tooth or something like that, but still that they did the best job that they could, while they were serving in the White House, and so I'm sure most of us would have our own point of perspective. So, and I did not include the TV right here, but let's just say. If anybody warns is that, draw like a little TV right there. And, usually, whenever I watch the president's speeches, a lot of times I'm using my mobile phone to watch the president. But, still, whenever I'm watching TV quite a bit of times, whenever the president comes on TV, that it seems like is to where that, they're talking about what they're planning on doing, but still, that, you're not going to make everybody happy, it seems like. And if anybody were to say that whenever you're up there in the White House, you'll maybe have a better understanding about what the politics of what congressmen, what they're trying to do about fixing the matters that's going on in the country. And one of those is going to maybe be about is toward that health reform, and the other one is maybe going to be about job growth and job creations, But still, though, that watching the president on TV, though, that we all wonder to where that that, you know, those who did not vote for that candidate, you know, those who did vote for that candidate, but still, though, that you know, think about is to where that one president that only serves for one term, and you're like thinking as to where that you know, exactly, you hear about that. I think George H.W. Bush, you know, George Herbert Walker Bush, I guess, you know, he wind up losing re-election, and you know, even though if they work hard, this president is going to work hard on trying to get reelected, and it's like, and then they wind up losing, and so it seems like to where that you know, yeah, number one, I was also thinking too, if that president had already run for one term as vice president, one president who's trying to run for president, one politician who's trying to win the election, if they win an election to be vice president and then they run for president. But I don't think that was the case with Jimmy Carter. With Jimmy Carter, though, I guess you know, yeah, he ran for one term. You know, he was president for one term, and after you know, he wound up. I don't know if he lost re-election or if he just. I'm like, yeah, there's something else that went on during his presidency. But talk about for the presidents, though. Looking back at these presidents, that just think as to where that with most of these presidents, that quite a few of them, that they might promised a number of things while they were in office. You know, before they were elected president, they may have promised a lot of things whenever they were up there in the White House. But it seems like like if anybody were to say that you know, what's one thing, you know, they may not be able to, you know, fix everything, and I'm sure most of us can't fix everything. You know, you can't fix everything. You know, even though if you think that you know, you've been president for 4 years and nothing's going to happen, you know, nothing's happened yet, and what you going to do about it, Mr. President? And so, yeah, you can't, you know, fix everything while you are in office, or, you know, while you take a charge of being commander-in-chief. You know, whenever you're commander-in-chief, whenever you're president, you're going to maybe have a lot of the Americans that are going to be frustrated and mad, and all mad at the president because things are going wrong, and a number of things that need to be fixed. And so that's why, if anybody say, whenever you're going to be running for president, half the time it seems like that all that energy that you put into maybe being commander-in-chief, you know, also is to think about, is to think about the country, you know, not necessarily, you know, yeah, that whenever you're president, that I guess what's way of how we can describe president? It's not the same thing as principal. I'm sure if any kids wondered to word it, you know, can we really tell the difference between what's it like being president and compared to what's being principal? Whenever you're principal of a school, it seems like that you are in charge of what's going on there at the school, and then the matters and concerns that goes on, compared to being president. You know, you're talking about the country right there, or a company. And so it seems like you say that, yeah, it's a big job, and maybe one of the reasons to why maybe a president that did not get elected or re-elected is because that you know, that there's something about, maybe a little bit about the past history, and I don't know if really working for a peanut factory really had anything to do with the fact about why Jimmy Carter only ran for one term. Yeah, it's also could be about as to where that, you know, whenever, you know, he lost, you know, from the Republican side. I guess if that's what I read about, you know, from looking up the history about Jimmy Carter, that he lost from the Republican side or something. But during the campaigning, but still, that it's a big job, and I'm sure anybody say that whenever you lose, that you know, you really, like we've had for the past 20 years, it's we've had about maybe 2 or 3 presidents that only that wind up, you know, losing re-election, and they wind up not getting elected at all, and just wondering, you know, to where what they did wrong. But still, though, that I guess really, I'm like, I guess what's the best of how we can really explain to where that about, you know, for being for president, that no matter who you voted for, it seems like whenever you go out and place a vote on election day, no matter who you voted for, just because that person lost, you know, that don't mean that they're mad at anybody, but still, though, that just think about the country, though, that the job's not done yet, no matter if you win or lose the election, but still, that, for what we all need to do just to work together, just to get the job done. And it seems like to where that, whenever you're going to have a president, no matter if they're going to be a peanut-shaped head or if they're going to have a clown face, look on them, and just want to know, like, whenever you there might be a president that we don't really care for too much, or maybe that we don't like them just because they're not doing all what they promised, or maybe because that there's something that they got to take care of, and it's an important matter about something that's going on in the country, and you're like one to where every time the president comes on TV, and sometimes you're thinking as to where he interrupts your favorite TV show, and you're also wondering too that Mr. President, I'm like, I'm in a meeting. What do you want, Mr. President? So, if you're in the middle of a meeting, and then the president comes on and tells the American people about what's going on, in the country. And I think it's ISIS now, the country of ISIS, or, some country like that is about our security, for, I guess, what Donald Trump is trying to manage about ISIS. But you got these presidents that one of them that only runs, one or two of them, or so within the 20 years are only going to, run for one term. And you think about it as to where that, that's the first thing that comes to the question as to why the president, only, they did not get reelected, that they lost the election and, to be reelected. And so it's like, even though if they worked hard at it, but still, though, that I guess, from with these presidents, though, I guess, and more likely they may say that, that during the time, they did the best they could, and it seems like most parents can maybe say that, that those presidents did the best they could, while they were in office. They were not, they went to the meetings like they were supposed to. That president, showed up, that president signed a bill like they were supposed to. But those presidents, the president did the best they could, while they were up there in the White House. While they were up there in the White House, they did the best job that they could of taking care of what needed to be taken care of. And sometimes it seems like that you have some of these Democrats and Republicans, some of these campaignings, anybody who's wanting to run for president, that it seems like, that there's all kinds of questions and discussions of the matter about that, even on a Twitter account. I want to know about, about our former presidents. That, former president, if it's Richard Nixon or if it's, President, Bill Clinton especially. I don't know if anybody has tried sending if you're able to talk to the president, using Twitter, Facebook or Twitter, you're able to talk to the presidents, the former presidents, but want to know about, the ones that only served for one term. And you'll likely think is to where you ask the president to something, and it's like, the first thing you might ask is to where, how come that you lost your re-election? And, but, even though if their presidency was before your time, you might still ask a little bit of the question also. But still, though, that, if it's going to be, President Ford, or if it's going to be Bill Clinton, or if it's going to be George W. Bush, who are going to be the presidents, that you hear about these presidents, and just think about it, as to one way to remember by is to where the birthday about the presidents. And whenever a president that comes on TV, that the first thing that you might even say is to where, I did not vote for that president, so I really don't care about what they got to say. But, still, sometimes it seems like, that, most presidents, though, that whenever they're coming up on TV, that the first thing that's going to maybe come to my mind is to where, that, that's the president, that's our commander-in-chief, and I guess you try to show respect to whoever that's going to be president. No matter if you did not vote for them, I guess that's usually what I have to say about it, is to where, that whenever you went out to go vote, you spoke up for what who you wanted to, to run, for president, or who, for Proposition B or C, but, who you want to speak up and place your vote. But, you likely one or two where that, not all presidents are going to maybe have a college degree, but let's just say, though, that, with, a few of these presidents, that some of them who do have a college degree, and you're likely one or two where, that, being job for president, that, it's a lot of work, no matter if you are a student or a business person, or that you start working a job, or, you ran for president, and just thinking as to where that, it's a big job. And being, having to fix the matters that's going on in the White House, and you're also thinking as to where that whenever the president comes on TV, that they're going to be saying as to where that, whenever you voted for that candidate, it seemed like that they were not supportive of, that bill or something like that. Whenever a president comes on TV, it seems like that they had a lot of things against the senior citizens, a lot of people with mental disabilities, and as well as, compared to the veterans, and then as compared to passing a bill on maybe, health care, reform or something like that. So whenever you see these presidents on TV, that it seems like to where you think that they don't show no support at all for what's going on with the educational sources and what's going on with our taxes. And so sometimes, though, whenever I see these presidents, it's the same thing with President Trump, or if it's going to be with the vice presidents, that whenever they come up on TV, it seems like that you get aggravated whenever they don't talk about anything that's going on with you, about what's going on with your case, so far as that tuition cost, or maybe it could be about something about job growth, or maybe insurance. And so whenever you have these presidents that come on TV, and sometimes, though, it seems like I didn't vote for the person, so I don't know why I need to watch him. But for those citizens, for those former U.S. citizens, being our president, though, that when we're going to be talking about a president, if a former president, though, that for being president, it seems like, a lot of the American people seem like everything seems so totally different compared to the campaign during, for the election and the campaigning promises, and compared to, future is born, and compared to, he promised this and he promised that. And I remember that, nearly 2 years ago that I got a message saying that, I think it was from the Republican side. Whenever Jimmy Carter was president, he promised a lot of change. And it could maybe be the same way, maybe a little bit with the, if it's Richard Nixon or if it was Ronald Reagan. Whenever Ronald Reagan was president, that he may have promised a lot of change too. And, they promised a lot of change. But it hasn't happened, and I guess a lot is better than no. I'm like, the things, for what sorts of changes that maybe we expect to see, for whoever that's going to be running for president. And you all have to think as to where that, there's more than one change, and a lot of change, and I guess sometimes it seems like the problem could also be as to where that they got to rewind chapters, if you want to kind of call it rewind chapters. The problems that were not fixed from before, the problems that came up, nearly 4 years before a president is elected, to go run for office. And you're thinking as toward the president before Carter, that, if I can remember the U.S., the history from like back in the 1960s, I guess, other than Kennedy, President Kennedy, but, still that, you have these presidents, though, matters that come up, whenever they're elected president, it seems like, they build a priority list, if you want to call it that. They build a task toward that these are the promises that they say that they're going to go ahead and try to fix. And then by the time they get up there in the White House, we're talking about problems that were already there. You're not, you may have been told about the problems before you were elected, but then since you won the election, here's your schedule, and here's the book of the bills that need to be passed. So really, how else can we really explain it other than with these presidents, though? With these presidents that think about each year on President's Day, that look back at these former presidents, that, the job's a lot harder than what you thought it was, or, that, what has been accomplished from the past, from the 4 years, But other than that, talk about for Jimmy Carter, though. With Jimmy Carter, that, along with Ronald Reagan, that whenever you go out and place a vote, that, whenever the president comes on TV, that he's talking to the American people, but sometimes that what he really wants you to do is listen. But I know sometimes, though, that, the president, whenever he is on live television, and sometimes it seems like, who's listening? For those who are listening and those who like politics, or if you don't like politics, that, please listen up. This is what's going on in our country. But, still, though, that whenever the president comes on TV, it seems like that he's trying to get everybody's attention about what's going on in the country and what's going on with our job growth and business, building the roads and the infrastructures. And so you're likely thinking as to where that 4 years seems like plenty of time to get all that done. And, whenever stuff gets delayed, stuff gets postponed and canceled, and that could also result too. But anyway, thanks for watching. Everybody, talk about for President's Day of 2019. Talk about for Jimmy Carter. But there's television. But other than that, talk about the presidents. The presidents are only run for one term, as so far as doing the best job they can.